Well, we continue with the broadcast this morning as we head to be joined by Professor of Law, Religion and Global Politics and the Director of the Center for the Study of Islam and Decolonization, Professor Junaid Ahmad, whose article and this piece appeared in Muslim Views talking about Islamophobia and the jailing of Imran Khan, how this has actually fueled the global Islamophobia debate. Prof. Junaid, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome. And as always, an absolute pleasure having you with us.
Wa alaikum salam. It's always good to be with you.
Yes, Prof. You know, when I read this article, obviously one needed to read it more than one time, once, to just to understand the analysis that you have done. Because sometimes, simplistically, we look at Islamophobia, we think along the French headscarf ban, and we think of the media, or we think about what's taking place in a Muslim school. But we've obviously understood this whole term or the definition of Islamophobia too simplistically. But there is another angle, and this is what actually caught my eye, the whole political definition of Islamophobia, particularly in the light of Imran Khan and his imprisonment.
No, absolutely. I think that what has happened, particularly in the period of the war on terror, so called after 9/11, is that we have seen Islamophobia more as a personal and attitudinal approach to Muslims. The phobia, the fear, the hatred that we associate phobias with other things as well, rather than engaging in, as you are now suggesting, a political, a structural, and institutional analysis of where Islamophobia comes from and how is it deployed politically. I think that we then began to develop an understanding in which we situated Islamophobia as part of a broader project of empire in controlling vast populations and lands across the world, particularly in Asia, in West Asia, where we also know there's huge oil reserves. So I think that we have to understand that Islamophobia, more than any just approach to other Muslims, theologically, I think this is the mistake that we often make, that we treat this more as a theological issue, that, well, there's just a disagreement over Muslims have believing in one God versus the Trinity and so on. I think that most Islamophobes, the ones that conduct very racist type of actions, they don't bother to first check what the theological beliefs of the Muslims are. They just know in their very ignorant way how to spot a Muslim and often target them. One thing I'll mention is that the way this often manifests itself is through very ignorant acts of targeting of even people that look like Muslims that may not be Muslims. Our viewers should know that the first victim in response to the September 11th attacks in 2001 in the United States was a Sikh individual. Now, the ignorant American couldn't distinguish this Sikh versus a Muslim, but this is why a very useful definition that we have come up with for Islamophobia is that it is a form of racism that targets Muslimness or expressions of perceived Muslimness. And I think that this operates in all sorts of contexts, and not only in Muslim minority contexts, but also in countries like Pakistan in a Muslim majority context.
Yes, Prof. And also, I think just to unpack and to try and understand, the whole politics behind Islamophobia. Now, obviously, you've cited Imran Khan as an example. And perhaps, if we could just try and delve into a lot more detail as to why you've used the case of Imran Khan just as an example.
Absolutely. This is a huge political movement, regardless of whatever one's views are on specifically on Imran Khan, his politics, his ideology. I mean, it must be said the poor guy is sitting in jail for 3 years. So I mean, I don't even think that that should be even in the discussion at this point. The whole idea is that this is a mass movement, probably the one of the biggest, if not the biggest, political movement in the history of the country. That is Pakistan Tehreek Insaf (PTI). in terms of the specific political party, but as part of the general body politic in which you can say roughly more than 80% of Pakistanis are supporters of Khan. So you have this huge political movement in a very significant Muslim majority country, as everyone is probably now following its increased role in this mediation process. And of course, Pakistan, there's a reason why Pakistan is positioned, is chosen to play this role. It's a serious country with a large military, nuclear armed. And so you have this movement going on there in Pakistan. And you have movements in other parts of the Muslim world. Let's not forget about what happened in Egypt when after the Arab Spring, the Muslim Brotherhood is elected and Morsi is elected, and then we see what happened to Morsi. So the one thing that I think it's important to emphasize here, and these examples, and especially the example of Imran Khan is pointing to, is that Islamophobia functions as a political tool of suppression. That's what we sometimes forget, as a political tool of suppression of governance. And so this is why, for if we'll remember, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Ikhwan, and its various offshoots, at one point, the Saudis and the other Gulf monarchies had no problem with them and in fact were supporting them. The problem becomes when these movements actually become too big for their boots and they actually have a mass democratic base. That is anathema. That is what these monarchies, these republics of generals in charge, and so on. That's what they have a problem with. And I often emphasize this: the Iranian Revolution, the propaganda was always that it was a revolution that is attempting to export their own specific brand of Shiism to the rest of the Muslim world. No, it was fundamentally an anti monarchical revolution, a republican revolution. And I think that that's how we need to see that. Of course, we know the Islamophobia in the West, of course, in India, in Kashmir, and the China and the Uyghurs. But within Muslim majority world, we also have to understand it as a tool of governance to control expressions of Muslimness that believe that that their faith tradition has something to say in the politics, in the economy, in the society of their countries. And I think that that's where we can spot how these regimes are so afraid of that expression of political agency, of the demand for Muslim political autonomy.
Yes, Prof. Also, I think you use some very interesting terminology in this article. You speak about romanticizing, you speak about cowardice, you speak about also movements. Particularly when certain things obviously come to an end. For example, the romance that actually comes to an end, and again, we find that this is something that many intellectuals don't focus on. But also, that type of language that you've used in your article is very, very powerful. It's very, very profound when one actually delves deeper and tries to get an understanding in terms of what you are trying to say.
Yes, I think your interpretation would be the more generous and the kinder one. I think most folks will be just say, "Well, this is just provocative and polemical for no reason." But I think that there is a reason, because I think that we do not attempt to understand this. We do not highlight this. In fact, we bury whenever we see such types of developments taking place within Muslim majority countries. It's far easier to speak about what the Indian regime is doing to Muslims in India and to Kashmiris, or of course, what the entire Western plutocracies are doing to the Muslim populations within their countries, as well as their interventions, their wars and invasions in Muslim countries throughout the world. So I think that that's easier. But then, when speaking about internally in a country as like Pakistan, so on the one hand, you can speak about, okay, a lot of these countries, Gulf countries, they make no pretense to being democracies or anything of the sort. But a country like Pakistan, which does claim to be this huge democracy, 250 million people, when they do it, I really do think that we Muslim intellectuals, if in a very principled way, we have to call that out. Imran Khan is the perfect example of it. He epitomizes. It's not just the article is at pains to show, as you know, that this is not about Khan or anyone for that matter having the perfect politics on everything, but it is about him symbolizing a population, a country that has been yearning for more freedom, for more justice in society, to yearn for the completion of an incomplete decolonization process that happened in 1947, in which we've had westernized, or what one the Iranians called west-toxicated elites rule the country and completely subcontracted as hired guns for empire. So I think that this is why I think that the whole discussion about Islamophobia needs to be broadened. It needs to be expanded to include how it functions politically in completely pacifying, suppressing movements throughout the Muslim majority and Muslim minority world that are involved in activism to further justice, to oppose authoritarian and dictatorial regimes, and to generate international solidarity, not just within the Ummah itself, but with the Ummah and all oppressed groups. I mean, this is the brilliant thing about the Iranians. The Iranians, in their constitution, said that not only with other oppressed Muslims, but with the oppressed everywhere, whether it's in Cuba, Venezuela. So I think that once we start to develop this type of a lens or a framework of understanding what Islamophobia is, it allows Muslims to actually be involved in political agency, that and not just as spectators but as participants in their societies, but also as part of a transnational international solidarity movement that then can meaningfully address Palestine, Kashmir, and all these issues, whereas their regimes have been utterly bankrupt in being able to do so.
Well, certainly, and I think to a large extent, you make reference to the fact, and this is in the title even of the article, where you speak about the silence of influential intellectuals. And I think to a large extent, one needs to take serious note of the silence on the part of intellectuals and also leadership in general. And we should not limit it to intellectuals only, also to our scholarly fraternity.
Right. I mean, I perhaps being from that community, I feel like I have to be harder on it, and I actually genuinely do think that should be the first target. I mean, if the societies, if they're public intellectuals, or what we would like to believe are organic intellectuals that are accountable to the people, not just accountable to their kind of ivory tower settings, but to actual social movements, political movements, and people, which, you think of any such significant movements in modern history, the anti colonial movements, the liberation movement in South Africa, you have such a wonderful class of intellectuals, public organic intellectuals that offered their services, whatever they could do, to movements. I think that there's a scarcity of that in large parts of the Muslim world, and scandalously so in a context like Pakistan, in which I think your viewers will know there's a huge educated English speaking class, but where are they at in what's going on right now? And so I do use this example of Khan, in which I say that, when Khan and his movement seemed like they were on the rise, and it represented for many of these intellectuals something, okay, very interesting, that was a break from kind of the West toxicated earlier elites and intellectual discourse. But as soon as that movement is suppressed, no one really bothers with Khan or PTI or any such movements in the Muslim world. What happened to Morsi? Where's the Muslim Brotherhood? So I think that this is really, I mean, the Achilles heel of many of these intellectuals, that they will join these movements, or they will at least support these movements when they're on the rise. But when they are not being decimated, they're just they're out of the picture, they're absent. And I think that then that allows for many to lodge the very legitimate complaint that why is it that Islamophobia that you can just speak about, say, in the United Kingdom or somewhere else, etc., that's easy for you, but in Muslim majority lands where actually you have hundreds of millions of Muslims, there you go silent when things don't go your way.
Well, Prof, interesting analysis as always, and always a pleasure talking to you. I just wish we had a lot more time, but yeah, it is of the essence. But for now, we wish you all the best, and once again, Jazakallah for your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Professor Junaid Ahmad was us this morning, and with it, we're going for a break. We come back, and we are going to be focusing on the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup, and also taking a look at while we see the glitz and the glamour and the fire bombs in Mexico and the stadiums in Canada and the United States of America, East Palestine put on the back burner.
Soweto, it's time to stand together for justice, peace, and solidarity. Join us for the annual Soweto Walk for Gaza, taking place on Saturday, the 20th of June at 7:30 a.m. The walk will begin at the historic Regina Mundi Church and proceed to the monumentous Dlamini Mosque, bringing together people of all faiths, backgrounds, and communities in a powerful show of unity and support. Bring your family, friends, and fellow residents as we walk together for a common cause. Let your voice be heard and your presence counted. That's the annual Soweto Walk for Gaza, Saturday, the 20th of June at 7:30 in the morning, starting at Regina Mundi Church and ending at Dlamini Mosque. Together we walk, together we stand, together we show solidarity.